This is our special live coverage of a breaking news story. A longtime Democratic appointee to the Supreme Court, Justice Breyer, now set to retire. And that paves the way for President Biden to make his first ever Supreme Court pick. And it's a reminder of how uproarious this can all be. Yesterday and last week, Washington was in a very different place. Now, this is the story. This is the challenge. Joe Biden's campaign also had been eyeing the prospect of how this might come about if he were to become president. He pledged, and this was the first ever in American history to do this, that he would put a black woman on the high court for the first time if elected.
Number one, I committed that if I'm elected president, have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue.
That pledge makes the process already different. Whether the outcome is ultimately different depends on what comes next. Senate Democrats say they're ready for the nomination process, and we're seeing reports about potential shortlist candidates, beginning with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She has the kind of background that many liberals like as a public defender, and something the establishment likes because she's on basically the second highest court in the land after the Supreme Court, the D.C. Circuit, where she got not only the United Democratic support, including Manchin and Sinema, but 3 Republican senators. We touched on that at the top of the hour. And Judge Jackson said this in remarks just last year.
One of the things that we've all observed over this past year is that the United States of America has many resources, but it also has many needs, including the need for skilled lawyers who can defend the rule of law and promote access to justice.
I care deeply about reaching the right result and doing my best to render reasoned rulings for the benefit of the people who come before me.
Some progressives see her as a person who definitely has the integrity, who talks the talk, rule of law, independence, fairness, but also has a background that suggests she would care about the lives of ordinary people and systemic racism in America. Now, if you remember Judge Jackson's name, or you remember her rulings, I can tell you one that we definitely reported on, so if you follow the news, you might have heard about it. She ruled memorably in Trump's first impeachment, when Trump had instructed the DOJ to argue that all age records should be absolutely immune. That was one of the many bonkers claims that were just thrown around in the Trump era. Judge Jackson rejected it and wrote, quote, "Presidents are not kings. They do not have subjects bound by loyalty or blood." Another reported frontrunner is another name you might know. Sherilyn Ifill is president and director of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She's a legal leader in more of an advocacy sense, and full disclosure, she's been on this program and many MSNBC shows because she has established herself as a leading voice in civil rights. Here she was speaking to 60 Minutes about race in America.
Race lies at so much of the core of what is problematic in our society today, and that is so easily exploitable because we have not had the courage in this country, and particularly most white people have not had the courage to really decide this is your job every day as a citizen, is to deal with the fractures that ultimately, if we don't confront them, will destroy us.
If you notice that Ifill speaks differently there, that's because of a different role. She's speaking as a progressive advocate and sometimes litigator, not bound by the rules of active judges, which is what you see with some of the other potential names. For example, Judge Leandra Kruger on the California Supreme Court. She was also a former Deputy Solicitor General under Obama. As mentioned, more like government experience than NAACP advocacy. And then there's also Judge J. Michelle Childs, a South Carolina District Court judge who was nominated to the D.C. Circuit and strongly supported by someone who is close, we know, to President Biden, and that is Jim Clyburn. So we turn now to someone who has an actual vote on all this, Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, who serves on the Judiciary Committee, and Maya Wiley back with us. Senator, I thank you for being here. We all understand this process. Thank you. We understand the process and obviously respect that you'll go through it, that you'll vet whoever is chosen. But I am curious if you can tell us anything about either the individuals on this list or anyone else you have your eye on as the White House decides and vets who to pick.
First of all, I would like to join basically, I think, our country in thanking Justice Breyer for his decades of service on behalf of the people of our country and the kind of judicial temperament that he brought. And how he approached the decision making. And clearly, Ari, based on what you just said, the segment just before, we have a number of really highly qualified Black women, and I very much support President Biden's decision to put a Black woman on the court. High time, about time.
Maya, I want to ask you about the qualifications, because it's so easy for people to immediately start looking at things in certain categories, and it is true that there's this historic pledge on the table. But as someone who both understands the way categories have been systemically abused in America, as your work attests to, Maya, but also transcending certain things, let's be clear, judges and people with a lot of government experience have tended historically to be sometimes less progressive jurists than people that come out of advocacy, the classic example being Thurgood Marshall. I'm curious if you see any differences here that we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, I thank you for that question, Ari, because I think it's critically important to know, first of all, every single one of these attorneys that we're seeing on this list are highly qualified, not just qualified, but highly qualified. And remember that Donald Trump drew out the process that had the American Bar Association qualify people he appointed. That was something that we've always had as a neutral, nonpartisan way of ensuring that anyone who is brought before the committee has been vetted by the profession to say this person is qualified. But what's so important to note here is that the one thing we should not hear in this process is for any one of these candidates who has not sat on the bench yet, that somehow means they are unqualified. Because frankly, even if we look at all of the chief justices that have served on the Supreme Court, out of 17, the last 17, 9 of them never served on the bench, and they've all been white men. So I think the point here is to make sure there is no double standard, that we're looking at qualification that does not require service on a bench somewhere in the country, and recognize that, frankly, even the other 8, very few of them had even very much experience on the bench. The question is, how well do you understand the law? How much can you do something that even Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, a Reagan appointee, noted, which is the importance of bringing your experience of the world to the bench. And it's one of the reasons why it's high time and past time as the senator for a Black woman. We need that experience on the bench.
And when it comes to the Senate, here's what President Biden just said about what he's dealt with in the Senate. Senator, take a listen.
I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done.
And yet here we are. I'm curious, Senator, what you see in the confirmation clash ahead.
What I'm looking for is a justice who can be fair and impartial, and who does not have an ideological axe to grind, which is what we saw, as far as I'm concerned, in President Trump's nominees, including to the Supreme Court. So yes, I am expecting a fight, but there you have it. And I'm looking for someone who's going to be not only highly qualified, as all of the people that you already talked about are, but who really brings to the judiciary the kind of diversity that I'd like, that someone who will consider the impact, the effects of whatever decision making is on people in our country, so that they're not making decisions just based on, which I would like them to base it on law, which would be nice, and precedent, and who are not eagerly trying to get rid of decades of precedent that would protect a woman's right to choose, for example, and voting rights, etc. But I'd like a justice who also will take into consideration the real life impact of the decisions he or she will be making.
Yeah, and that sounds like a good North Star. I want to thank you on what is obviously a busy time in the Senate and the Judiciary Committee. Senator Rono joining us, Maya Wiley on these issues. Thanks to both of you. We have just our shortest break now, 60 seconds.